Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just broke down some of the big time upsets this past weekend, including Toledo just outright dominating Mississippi State and Starkville. But let's get into a little bit of a week 3 whip around. There were a number of things that happened that we just got to get on y'all's radar. There were a number of really good games toward the backstretch of this weekend. But let's get into this real quickly, and we'll start with this game. We'll do this really quickly because obviously quite the blowout for Texas. They are the new number 1 team in the land. They're number 2 there because that's what they were when they played, but I realize I have these flipped. Texas did not lose this game by 49 points. They won it by 49 points, so no worries there, Longhorns fans. You were more than fine. But the big news coming out of this one is Quinn Ewers did have an abdominal strain early on in the game. Also had a little bit of a hand injury that didn't seem to bother him too much throughout this one, so I don't think that's much of a worry. But the abdominal strain looks like it's going to keep him out of the ULM game coming up this weekend, and then we'll see what happens in that Mississippi State game. Could be back for that game, could not. At the end of the day, if you're Texas, you likely want him healthy for that Oklahoma game after that bye week. So I would not be surprised if he missed the next 2 games. Would not be surprised if he missed the next one and then was back for Mississippi State. It'll definitely be something to watch. But Arch Manning came in and put on a show. There's no two ways about it. Went 9 for 12, 276 total yards, including a 67-yard touchdown run, and then had 5 total touchdowns. This kid was outright incredible, did everything that you wanted to do, and this team was a lot more explosive with him on the field. That was the one thing that he does a little bit better than Quinn Ewers is throw that deep ball. They utilize that a ton. And it was one of those things that you can see how incredible this kid is. You can see why everyone loves him so much. Obviously, it is UTSA, so we'll see what happens down the road. And if he plays that Mississippi State team or even plays in that Oklahoma game, we'll get a really good idea of who he is. But this was really impressive. There's no two ways about that. He did not think he was going to play in this game, at least until much later on. And he was thrust into action and just did everything perfectly. It was really impressive, and another reason why Texas has really nothing to worry about in that quarterback room. Like, Quinn needs to be back for them to win a title. I feel very confident in that. This offense is not nearly as nuanced and multiple with Arch Manning on the field rather than Quinn Ewers, but at the end of the day, Arch Manning should be more than fine to get them through this little bit before they get Quinn Ewers back. And it was a tough night for everyone that said Arch Manning is a 5-star because of his name, because he put on a show, and he showed that he might have just been a 5-star because he's a really good football player. But let's move on to this one. This might have been one of the more fun games of the entire weekend as well. Washington, just off the bat, that 2-point conversion call is outright insane. I have no earthly idea how they thought that was going to work, but ridiculous. More than anything, Washington State just got a huge win. This is one of those wins that it makes you think differently about this Washington State team in a number of different ways. I think you have a number of guys to watch here, and the biggest one for me is John Mateer. He played a really solid game, did just enough, kind of created problems for this team, had 16 carries, 62 yards, 2 touchdowns, did exactly what he needed to do with his legs throughout this game. And I think when you look at this Washington State team, look at the rest of their schedule. Take the time to look at the rest of their schedule, because there's a Boise State game at Boise State in a couple of weeks. If they win that one, this is a team that can make the playoff. And that sounds crazy because there was a notion that I kind of laughed off throughout the offseason, but this is a team that can really make some things happen. And if they can win that Boise State game, it might just be hard to deny them out of that CFP. But we'll obviously get to that throughout the season, and we'll see how that develops. But right now, Washington State might just be one of those teams. Oregon sent their statement. They did the thing that we absolutely needed them to do. They were who we thought they were for a lot of the season. They just needed a little bit more of a runway to get going. Everything that was a problem going into this game for Oregon was not really a problem in this game. Oregon had tons of explosive plays, I believe 5 or 6 over 20 yards. Tez Johnson got involved with over 100 yards, ran for 240, so the offensive line was so much better. Dominant defense all over the field, which didn't necessarily need to come along, was already playing really good football, but definitely nice to see nonetheless. They did everything that you needed them to do to feel really confident in this team going forward, and I think they're ready to roll. I think it's one of those things where they just needed one of these performances. They just needed one to give them all that confidence, get the juices flowing in. Now they go into conference play, and we'll see what happens there, but this was the Oregon that I expected to see throughout the season, and I expect to see a lot more of it throughout the rest of the season. Oklahoma, escaped in some ways in this game. Now, it ended up being not all that close, or at the end not all that close, but Oklahoma did need a late touchdown to make this one happen. I do think the big thing that I'm taking away from this is Oklahoma was in a position up 21-6 going into halftime, and after one of the most bizarre missed extra points I've ever seen, by the way, but they just couldn't get a knockout punch until very late in this game. They just could not quite put Tulane away, and it's something that if you give anyone else life in the SEC, you're going to have a big-time problem. But one of the big-time things is the O-line is still an issue. They're still going to have to figure that out, and the SEC team, especially the one coming this weekend in Tennessee, is going to be able to take advantage of that. But Jackson Arnold running the ball was a nice little counter to that. Had 14 carries, 97 yards, 2 touchdowns. Keeping that in the mix at the very least makes the job so much easier for that offensive line. So a big-time win definitely gets them a little bit of confidence. Definitely looked cleaner across the board for Oklahoma in this game. But now you got Tennessee coming to town, and we'll see what happens there. But they got to play a ton better to win that game. I can promise you that. Kansas State got a huge win over Arizona on Friday, and we got to talk about this one because there are a couple of big-time takeaways. And the biggest one for me is Arizona is essentially nothing on offense. They're a really fun team that has 2 really, really good players in Noah Fafita and Tatori McMillan. They don't have anyone else that they feel comfortable with. That's just the reality of this offense right now. There is no one else out there. Lamonius Craig, I believe, had 50 yards. I think a lot of them came in garbage time. So it wasn't like they were really pushing the ball around and forcing it to other people and doing all the things that they just very much have to do if they're going to be able to be successful. I don't know what Dino Babers' approach is right now. It's got to change, plain and simple. They have to find a way to get T-Mac the ball, no doubt about it, but spread it out so it's easier to get him the ball. It is so hard to get that guy the ball right now that he essentially just has to make a remarkable play for him to make that catch. So there are a number of things that need to be fixed there. The Kansas State side, Avery Johnson finally got in on the act, had 110 yards rushing and definitely kept this Arizona defense on their heels, but it was one of those games that Kansas State proved who they are. I think they proved that they are one of the class teams in the Big 12. I think Arizona is one of those teams that's just very far from where they need to be, and they're not far enough from conference schedule to be that far from where they need to be. So it might just be a tough season for Brent Brennan in his first year at Arizona, but Kansas State with a big-time statement, the team that I have winning the conference, I feel pretty good about that right about now. But moving forward to the Backyard Brawl, this was one of the more fun games of the entire weekend. This was absolutely awesome. West Virginia loses this one by 4 on a last-second touchdown by, I believe, I don't want to get this wrong. Cannot find his name. I apologize. But whoever scored that touchdown, congratulations to you. But there were a number of big-time plays in this game. The guy that really stole the show was Eli Holstein. It was really impressive. The Alabama transfer, very talented guy coming out of high school, but came in with Dylan Lonergan, kind of created a little bit of a logjam there. But found his way up to Pitt, 21 for 30, 360 total yards, 3 total touchdowns. He was incredible. He did everything you wanted to do, including just escaping one of the most ridiculous sacks I've ever seen someone escape. But really impressive performance. He played everything. He left everything out there on the field. And then from the West Virginia side, they have so many issues. I don't know what this team is right now. I don't know what they want to be defensively, especially, but also offensively. I think they're a little bit clunky. They're just not really getting that rhythm that you expect to find with a third-year starter like Garrett Green. Garrett Green. But overall, huge win for Pitt. They get a rivalry win. Then they get Youngstown State before a bye. And we'll see what happens in ACC play. This is a team that I don't know how far they're going to go, but if Eli Holstein's playing this level of football, definitely a team worth the watch. I can promise you that. But let's talk about UCF and TCU. This one was crazy. It was back and forth. It was absolutely wild. Very glad I got that TCU +1 when I did because worked out pretty nicely. I got a little bit of a push here, but I said early on in this last week, I said when we were talking about this game that UCF had to find a passing attack. Well, KJ Jefferson went 13 for 22, 230 yards and 3 touchdowns. He did exactly what you needed them to do. And then TCU on the other side could only pass the ball. They had 58 rushing yards compared to over 400 passing. Cam Cook just has to be more for this team. If they're going to be able to win games in the Big 12, especially with a lot of the offenses that they're going to face, they need a go-to running back, and it's got to be Cam Cook at the end of the day. So they're going to have to figure out a way to get him more involved in the offense, because if they can, it's going to be really tough. And then UCF, they've done what they needed to do. They started this conference schedule the way that they wanted to, and now you get a bye, then Colorado at home, then at Florida. So you got to feel pretty good about those games as you go into the next little bit, and then they'll probably be favored in every game until at Iowa State. This is a dangerous team down in Orlando, and we knew that going into the season. I was a little bit skeptical and still am to a certain degree, but I do think this is a team that got exactly what they needed this weekend and is going to move forward and probably feel pretty good about their chances to win this conference. And then finally, Colorado. Why do I keep doing this wrong? Colorado beat Colorado State 28-9. I apologize. I'm getting all of my graphics a little bit screwed up today. But Colorado did get a big-time win over Colorado State 28-9, and the show was the show that it is for every single Colorado game. Shedeur Sanders was magic. He was absolutely incredible in this game. 36 for 49, 310, 4 passing touchdowns. Didn't necessarily, light the scoreboard on fire the way that I think a lot of people expected them to, but executed. And that's the most important thing, especially with a team that has had points where you're just kind of questioning what the execution level is or how much they want to execute at that level. They were really clean. And frankly, I think this might be the most impressive performance that I've seen from the Deion Sanders Colorado teams. I thought it was really, really impressive going up to a rival environment, a lot of people against you, that, and being able to just play really clean football. And that's one of the few times you've seen Colorado be able to do that, even in the wins they had last year. It was pretty ugly football that was just, interspersed with some big-time plays. But this was clean. This was really good, and I thought they played really impressive football. So was very impressed with Colorado coming out of this one. I think this is one of those games that I don't know if it changes my opinion on Colorado going forward, but definitely makes me feel a little bit more confident about what that locker room is compared to what I felt like it was last week after the Nebraska game. But overall, very impressive performance. And then this kid is insane. 13 catches, 100 receiving yards. He had 2 touchdowns. He also had a pick on the defensive side of the ball. The kid's incredible. He also chased down a guy from 65. He's the best player in football. We're not having a conversation otherwise. This guy is outright incredible. He won't win the Heisman. I'm gonna go ahead and tear your heart out with that one already. He's going to be on too bad of a team to win the Heisman. I tend to believe there is going to be a point in the season where maybe those snaps just build up a little bit too much and he has to miss a game or two at some point. I hope that doesn't happen, obviously, but has happened in the past couple of years and definitely is a reality for this player. But this is a really fun team. This is a team that feels like they're slowly finding themselves. And now I don't think they're going to make a Big 12 run. I don't necessarily think they're a team that's going to be all that scary for the Utahs and the Oklahoma States of the world, but a really impressive win nonetheless. They might have found a little bit of a run game with Michael Welsh, the freshman running back out of Milledgeville, Georgia, not too far from me right about now, but he might just be the answer at running back. And if they find any bit of a running attack, then they're definitely going to be able to score a ton of points against teams. And then just a PS here for anyone that was waiting for me to comment on it. I don't have a problem with how Shedeur handled the postgame. If Braden Fowler, Nicolosi, and Torrey Horton want to talk all the crap going into the game, they don't get to act like best friends afterwards. That's my personal take on it. I understand there are people that have opposite takes. I'm not necessarily even the biggest fan of people talking crap going into games. I don't necessarily love it. Would not be the way that I go about business. Doesn't change that if you do, you can't be mad when the person gives it back to you. So I have no problem with how Shedeur handled that. I have questions about how he handled the post game, but that's a totally side conversation. I think the way he handled himself on the field is probably the way that I would have handled myself if that guy had said what he said about me. So that's just beside the point. Wanted to get that in there because I had a feeling there were going to be some people that were trying to get me to say anything bad about Shedeur in that circumstance. I don't think he did anything wrong, just plain and simple. I don't think that's an issue at all. I think it's a rivalry, and I think they're treating it that way. But very long show, and that gives you an idea of how crazy of a weekend this was. But that will do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We have really incredible people doing awesome work across every single sport. So if you're not just a college football guy, if you love the NFL, if you love baseball, if you love basketball, we got it fully covered for you over on GSMC. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you tomorrow, likely for more breakdowns of this crazy Week 3 we just had.